Good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock. You're watching the only breakfast show live from Westminster. Now, the United States will today attempt to reassert its role as a global leader on climate change, with President Biden set to host global leaders at a virtual summit at the White House. His administration says the world is way behind schedule in tackling the issue. In a moment, I'll ask the Business and Energy Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, what the UK is doing to catch up. Now, also this morning, a historic verdict, but how much is it going to change in America after the conviction of Derek Chauvin? I'll talk to a US police veteran who pushed for reforms over a 28-year career. That's at 7:30. And walking 30 miles her way. We'll hear from this amazing 3-year-old girl who's powering on with a prosthetic leg to walk a mile a day to raise money for a children's hospital. That's at 8:45. It is Thursday, the 22nd of April. A global call to action. President Biden will convene world leaders at a climate summit today and make key pledges to cut emissions in the United States. One of the key witnesses whose testimony led to the conviction of Derek Chauvin tells Sky News systemic change is needed in America.
He gets a nice, good trial, and he gets to be protected in prison for however long. But obviously, that's not the same for an African American.
India records more than 300,000 COVID cases in a day, the largest daily total seen anywhere in the world.
There's just no time to die.
And hope for live events. More on the trial that will see 4,000 music fans attend the Brit Awards without social distancing or masks.
It's a chilly start, but there is so much sunshine around. How long will it last? All the weather details coming up shortly.
Well, a very good morning to you. President Biden will lead calls for more global action on climate change today when he hosts 40 world leaders at a virtual summit at the White House. He's also expected to set an example to the world by promising to cut greenhouse gas emissions in the United States by at least half by the end of the decade. The pledge and the summit represent a concerted US effort to reclaim credibility and leadership on climate change after 4 years of inaction under Donald Trump. Alex Rossi reports now from Michigan on whether the US will be able to embrace a greener future.
There is smoke, noise, and plenty of fumes. This amateur race meet in Michigan is an American love letter to the petrol engine. But if President Joe Biden's to convince the country to ditch the gas guzzlers and go electric, he has his work cut out.
So much fun with what you can do with the gas engine.
You'd never buy an electric car?
I highly doubt it.
We're in the middle of American car culture, so it would take a lot for them to give up the cars they have, especially fun cars like this.
There is some hope for the green push. In the crowd of racers, we spotted one electric car owner. Ben Olsen made the conversion not to save the planet, but for performance.
You gotta bring them in the car, you gotta floor it, and you gotta show them how fast it really is. At the end of the day, most people are not gonna go and adapt to the future technology until they experience it.
Pollution from cars is the #1 source of emissions, and America will need to be weaned off its addiction to petroleum cars if it's to hit its climate target of net zero by 2050.
For Joe Biden to achieve his green agenda, it's going to be an enormous challenge. At the moment, only around 2% of new cars heading out onto America's roads are electric. But for success, that number's going to have to go up significantly.
But many consumers are put off by the cost, the lack of range, and there are simply not enough charging points. There is also another challenge, and that's making sure American workers are taken along for the ride. In Detroit, abandoned car factories litter the skyline. The fear is the green revolution will cost jobs.
people are going to have to believe that this green agenda means them too. Right now, many people think that that means someone else. That means someone with a college degree. That means someone who has a doctorate in something. They don't think that that applies to a person that's working on a factory line.
One of Joe Biden's first acts as president was to rejoin the Paris Accords. His new Green Deal, he says, will eventually boost the economy. And in California, you can get a glimpse already of that shiny new future. This state is home of the electric car, but for it to go mainstream, the consumer will need to be front and center.
It's important for the car industry and for technology to step up and make the product and the experience of driving an electric vehicle more attractive.
The environment is now central to all major policy decisions for the US government as it tries to make its economy green. But it's clear there is still a long road ahead, convincing the public to embrace an electric future. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Michigan.
Well, amongst the leaders speaking at the climate summit is Prime Minister Boris Johnson, as well as China's Xi Jinping, his first meeting with President Biden since the advent of the new US administration. So let's have a quick look at what pledges the different countries may actually make today. And it's expected President Biden will announce at least a 50% cut in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. That's ambitious. That comes after the UK pledged to reduce emissions by 78% by 2035. That's from 1990 levels. Some major polluters less ambitious. In December, China said its emissions would peak in 2030 and that it was aiming for net zero emissions by 2060, 10 years later than many other nations. And India, the third worst greenhouse gas emitter in the world, has criticised long-term emission reduction targets, with their Minister for Power calling them pie in the sky. Well, let's talk to the Business and Energy Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng. Good to see you this morning. Look, the Prime Minister clearly wants to say that the UK is leading the way with this hugely ambitious 78% reduction target by 2035. What have you worked out as to how we actually make that work?
I think there are lots of things that we're doing that are actually giving us a good chance of getting there. If you look at that 1990 base date, that's where all these emissions reductions are calculated from. Already today, we've reduced emissions by 45%. And what we're saying is that we will further reduce them to 78% in 2035. And if you look at the things we've done things like taking coal off the power grid. Even only 8 years ago, something like 40% of our electricity was coming from coal-fired power stations. Today, that figure is 2%. So we've taken out coal from electricity generation. We're relying more on offshore wind. We've got solar power. And there are lots of things that we're doing, which means that I think the target is very much achievable. It's not easy. No one is suggesting that it's an easy target to reach. But if we do continue decarbonisation, your clip showed the rollout of electric vehicles. There were challenges, but there's increasing demand for electric vehicles. And it's very possible, very likely, I think, that we can actually reach the target.
Well, what do you say to those businesses who've got concerns that, you just can't grow the economy at least as quickly as before whilst trying to meet such ambitious targets?
I don't think that's right. I mean, if you look at what's happened since 1990, which is, as I said, the base date from which these reductions are calculated, we've managed to grow the economy by 80% in that time. And yet we've also reduced our carbon emissions by 45%. So it's not true to say that reducing carbon emissions will impair economic growth. I think, on the contrary, I think a lot of the jobs that we're creating, a lot of the investment that's coming into this country that I see as business secretary is very much focused on trying to drive the green agenda. People are wanting to invest in hydrogen production. They're wanting to invest in offshore wind.
But we are now, because of Brexit, in a global economy in a much more sort of direct way, and we have now got to compete directly with with places like China and India that, are carbon-heavy economies?
I think they are, but even they are changing their behavior. I mean, it was interesting in your clip where you said that China would try and reach net zero by 2060. They only announced that in October. I mean, when I came into the department 2 years ago, people said to me, well, there's no way that you're ever going to get the Chinese to commit to net zero carbon emissions. Well, they've very publicly stated that that's what they want to see. And the evidence suggests that they are bringing in policies to try and reduce carbon emissions. And they're very interested in producing batteries and also trying to drive decarbonisation.
We know that the sort of UK carbon budget, if we can use those terms, is now including aviation emissions for the first time. We know that Heathrow is the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases in the UK. So with these very ambitious new targets, where does that leave Heathrow expansion?
I think Heathrow, and I speak to business leaders at Heathrow all the time, it happens to be very near my constituency, they're very committed to this agenda. They're very committed to what we call jet zero. So that's the idea of having sustainable aviation fuel. There's a lot of research going into this area. Heathrow is very committed to trying to get sustainable fuels, and they see it as a challenge. But that's something that they can meet over the next few years. And I think that, as I've said, you can grow the economy and reduce carbon emissions. I think we can try and get to a world where we have sustainable aviation, and that will drive economic growth as well. So I don't see a contradiction between trying to reduce carbon emissions and trying to grow the economy.
Minister, can we talk access, and particularly access to number 10? Now, the Prime Minister yesterday said no, he was not going to make any apology over the Dyson issue because he said it was all related to the ventilator project. So no apology needed because he was, it was all about the emergency production of ventilators. But doesn't it seem inherently unfair that some people, particularly bigger businesses, but some people have direct access to the Prime Minister, whereas others don't?
I don't think it's unfair in the sense that people are trying to lobby ministers, lobby MPs all the time. And in this particular instance, I think we're trying to create a story where there isn't one. The Prime Minister was very clear yesterday that he would have done exactly the same thing again. He had a duty, as far as he was concerned, to make sure that we got ventilators made here in the UK. At the time, as you'll remember, Simon, there was a huge crisis in Italy precisely because they hadn't produced enough ventilators. And that was the thing that we had to do. And he moved, in his words, the Prime Minister said, he moved heaven and earth to try and make sure that we got ventilators made here in the UK. And that's what happened. It averted an even greater crisis, and it saved lives. And it was very interesting to me that Tony Blair just said yesterday that he would have essentially done the same thing. He didn't see an issue there. And as I understand it, one of the Labour shadow ministers also said that Keir Starmer would have done the same thing. They would have tried their hardest to try and get ventilators made here in the UK.
Yes, but that's one separate issue, isn't it? One particular issue.
I don't think it is a separate issue.
But the idea that people can contact the Prime Minister directly. I mean, it's reported in the Times today that Boris Johnson was warned by civil servants to change his number because they thought he was too easily accessible.
I think that in the real world, in reality, people are contacting ministers, contacting MPs all the time. Business people are contacting MPs all the time. Constituents also contact me on my phone. And I think that in a modern democracy, it's very good that people actually can have direct access to ministers and people who are taking responsibility. In this particular instance, I don't think they're separated. I think it's very important to realise that we were acting in unprecedented circumstances. The Prime Minister had to make decisions at very high speed, and there was a crisis. People were dying of this disease, and we needed to make ventilators. And he in his words, he said he moved heaven and earth to make sure that the ventilators were made here and we didn't have a shortage. I think what he did was very responsible.
But this does raise the spectre of distrust in government. I mean, you defend it. That's your position to do so. But, you know, Johnny Mercer, now former Defence Minister, has talked about government being a disrespectful, distrustful cesspit. Now, that's coming from one of your own.
Yeah. I mean, Johnny, I just wanted to say, I mean, Johnny is a great colleague. He's a good friend of mine. A very passionate advocate for veterans' rights and their causes, and I wish him all the best. I don't really recognise his description of government. I think there are frustrations in any work environment. There are frustrations, and people feel sometimes they can't get through to what they actually want to do. I mean, that happens in all walks of life. And I know that Johnny was a great minister, and I wish him the best.
Yeah, but I mean, when you look at the quote, this is the most distrustful, awful environment I've ever worked in government. Almost nobody tells the truth, is what I've worked out. And I don't think anyone can get on their high horse about trust and ethics and all the rest of it in politics, because as far as I'm concerned, most of it is a bit of a cesspit. I mean, you cannot get a more damning indictment of what is going on, well, in politics, but from his perspective, directly in government.
Johnny has his own issues relating to what he feels about the government. I think he was very frustrated around the particular issues relating to veterans. And I think it would probably be best to direct those questions to Johnny. I think he was a very good minister. He was a very good colleague. I don't recognise his description of government. I accept that there are frustrations within government, but that happens in lots of different walks of life. People feel frustrated in their jobs. Sometimes they can't quite get what they wanted to.
Well, no, but I mean, but forgive me for interrupting, but his argument seems to be pretty much that he effectively told untruths to the people he was trying to represent, because he was told something would be acted on, and then it wasn't. So it's that lack of trust. It's broken promises, in effect.
I'm not here to criticise what Johnny did or to have an argument with him. I mean, if he had specific concerns which he's raised, I'm sure that you've asked him questions about that. For my part, I don't recognise his description of government, and I don't accept that description. That's not what I've experienced. But if that's what he said, I suspect you'd be better off asking him about his own opinions. My own perspective is that, there are frustrations in government. Sometimes things can be a little slow, but generally people work in a very collegiate way. As I've said, I've always worked very well with Johnny. He's always been a good friend, a parliamentary colleague, and I wish him the best.
Minister, good to talk to you. Thank you. Well, our political correspondent, Kate McCann, was listening to that. Kate?
I think it's fascinating, that whole section on accountability and trust and how people contact ministers, because Kwasi Kwarteng said really clearly there, in relation to Boris Johnson texting senior business figures, both men have said it was in a special circumstance in the pandemic. He said that they've done nothing wrong, that people are trying to contact ministers all the time. And then he went on to say to you that people often contact him on his own personal phone. And I think while it's talking about a smaller issue in this case, Boris Johnson, Mr Dyson, Greensill, David Cameron, this is a much wider issue about access and trust and who has a hotline to government ministers. And that's something that Kwasi Kwarteng really carefully didn't address there. He talked about specifics, but he wouldn't talk in general. And it's an issue that's going to come up again and again, because the heart of it is trust and transparency. And that's something that Labour have accused the government of not doing properly. But now, as you say, Johnny Mercer, a Conservative MP, former minister, is saying the same thing. And this issue is not going to go away. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a much bigger investigation into how it works, how lobbying works, and how government decisions are made in the months to come.
But it's hugely difficult when we look at just the basic technology of all of this. We've just about all got mobile phones. We've all got other people's numbers. I mean, you wonder whether this is going to lead to people having to to move to completely different numbers if they get elected?
I don't think this is about people having phone numbers and mobile phones and contact with each other. I think that's always going to happen. It's always happened in politics. Even when we didn't have mobile phones, people would have had, you know, personal addresses to write to or different contacts. I mean, that's the nature of politics. It's the world that we all live in. But what this is about is that business leaders having the ear of the Prime Minister, being able to text him, not just the Prime Minister, but we've talked about David Cameron, Boris Johnson, other ministers too, being able to get quick decisions made, that puts them in a much more advantageous position than many small businesses around the country who are also struggling, also have questions and face financial ruin, actually, because of this pandemic. And it's that that's the real issue. It's about how government works best for businesses and whether it's fair that big companies get decisions made much quicker by very senior people than smaller companies do. And that's something that Boris Johnson himself, when he came into government, said he wanted to change and highlight. He promised that he would be there for the working man and woman across the country, and he knew that he had borrowed votes in red wall seats, particularly from other voters, and that he was going to earn their trust. And that's why this issue for the Conservatives is a really tricky one.
OK, Kate, thank you. Well, still to come this morning, planning for a world beyond the pandemic. We'll talk to the chair of the House of Lords COVID Committee, Baroness Lane Fox, about their new report on embracing a hybrid world. That's at 7:45. At 8:05, we'll talk to one of the chief political strategists behind the landmark Paris Climate Agreement ahead of the climate summit at the White House today. And how likely are foreign holidays this summer? Well, at 8:20, I'll talk to the Spanish tourism minister to find out if COVID certificates may be the answer. Now, on Tuesday, Derek Chauvin became the first white policeman ever to be convicted of killing a black citizen in the state of Minnesota. Now, despite the conviction, there remains concerns about institutional racism across the United States. One of the key witnesses in the trial, Christopher Martin, has told Sky News that even in prison, the system favours a white murderer over African-American lives. He was talking to our US correspondent, Sally Lockwood, who reports now from Minneapolis.
When George Floyd bought cigarettes with a fake $20 bill, it triggered the wretched sequence of events that led to the end of his life. The teenager who served him felt too scared to work at the store after his death. But being a key witness in the trial brought Christopher Martin a sense of relief.
That probably felt the best for me, to let everything out and get it off my chest and tell the world what really happened. I thought it was very beneficial for getting justice for George and his family. So that was very satisfying.
After the police were called, Christopher Martin was captured on CCTV with his hands on his head as he watched George Floyd's arrest unfold, something he talked about on the witness stand.
What was going through your mind during that time period?
Disbelief and guilt.
Okay. Why guilt?
If I would have just not taken the bill, this could have been avoided.
You say you felt guilt. How did it feel hearing the words guilty for Derek Chauvin?
Very good, very satisfying and relieving. It took a load off my back in a lot of ways, so I would say relieving.
Handcuffed in court, Derek Chauvin was taken into custody safely and with dignity, something he hadn't afforded to George Floyd. For Christopher, equality is still a long way off.
It just shows, again, this is what we have to deal with, inequality. He gets a nice, good trial, and he gets to be protected in prison for however long, but obviously that's not the same for an African American. I believe that once they put their badge on, they believe that they're better or higher up than other people and civilians, and so that gives them the right, quote unquote, to treat people however they want to. It's sickening, and there needs to be change immediately. Derek being guilty, that's one step, but there's a lot of areas that still needs work.
You also have to live with the memories of what happened. Do you think that's something you're going to carry with you forever?
Absolutely, that's something I'll carry to my grave. It'll get easier every day.
We're looking at some of the other headlines for you today. And India has reported the world's largest single-day number of daily COVID-19 infections. More than 314,000 people were confirmed as having caught the virus. Across the country, 16 million confirmed cases and almost 200,000 deaths. Hospitals have reported oxygen shortages amid the increase in cases, as well as a new variant being identified. Days ago, India was placed on the UK government's red list of countries for entering the UK. That actually doesn't come into force until 4 o'clock tomorrow morning. Pervasive racism was behind a failure to fully commemorate potentially hundreds of thousands of predominantly black and Asian veterans who died fighting for the British Empire. That's according to the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, who's apologised after it found that more than 110,000 individuals were not formally remembered in the same way as their white counterparts. The Defence Secretary will make a full statement on the investigation's findings later on today. The family of Daunte Wright, a black man killed by police in Minneapolis, preparing for his funeral today, just days after Derek Chauvin's guilty verdict for the killing of George Floyd. Hundreds gathered at a local church last night for a public viewing for the 20-year-old, with family and friends weeping before his casket, which was covered in red roses. Now, while this year's awards season has been scaled down because of the pandemic, there are plans for the return of crowds at the Brit Awards. 4,000 fans are set to attend the event next month without social distancing or masks, but proof of a negative test will be required. It's all part of a government trial which is giving hope to venues across the UK who hope to open their doors to larger audiences again pretty soon. Claire Gregory reports.
It feels like a lifetime ago. At last year's Brit Awards, Billie Eilish unveiled her Bond theme.
There's just no time to die.
But No Time to Die still hasn't made it into cinemas, and hundreds of venues across the country have stood empty. But that will change in May when 4,000 music fans attend this year's Brits.
They won't have to be socially distanced. They won't have to wear a mask. The whole point is to actually do it in the most normal way possible, but obviously to kind of test that as well to see how well these events can be sort of staged safely.
It's one of a number of government pilot events to get audiences back on seats in a safe return for the live music industry, which was one of the first to close, with even the biggest names out of work.
From a purely personal level, I've never spent so much time at home, I know, since 1983. It was the last time I spent this length of time in one place, and it's been wonderful in many ways, but professionally it's a disaster.
I don't want to spend all my life inside.
Artists have campaigned for grassroots venues, which many fear are being forgotten.
We don't really feel that the data and evidence that might be taken from this event is directly applicable to grassroots music venues. I don't think it will help the Exchange in Bristol or the 100 Club or the Philadelphia to reopen.
Grassroots venues are desperate for a government pilot on a smaller scale than an awards ceremony. Without this, it's hard to imagine audiences back inside by the end of June. Claire Gregory, Sky News.
OK, let's see what the weather's got in store for you today. Morning, Joe.
Good morning to you. Yeah, it's absolutely glorious out there. Plenty of sunshine around, not just today, but for the next few days. High pressure in charge, but just because we've got sunshine through the day doesn't mean to say that the nights won't be a little on the chilly side. Let's take a look.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hello there, good morning to you. Yes, the high pressure is going to stay with us over the next few days, so staying mostly fine right the way through until the end of the weekend, by which time we'll start to see a little bit of patchy rain working its way southwards. So this morning, like I say, loads and loads of sunshine around. It's a beautiful start to the day, but it is cold. Many parts saw temperatures below freezing, widely -2 or below, and I think we saw -5 in one or two places. So a widespread frost to start off with, but plenty of sunshine. A little bit of mist and fog over parts of Ireland too, but that will clear. And through the course of the day, very little in the way of cloud. It's may see a little bit of thin high cloud over northern parts of Scotland, but elsewhere, virtually nothing. So temperatures rising 14 to 16 degrees Celsius quite widely, and we could see 18, even 19 degrees Celsius over parts of Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland. That's 66 degrees Fahrenheit. That will feel very pleasant in light winds, but we are starting to see the winds picking up a little bit through the Channel and across Devon and Cornwall, so it will feel a little bit colder here, and temperatures a little bit lower on the east coast too.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Joe, thank you. Now, will justice for George Floyd bring about change to the United States? I'll talk to a former US federal officer in just a couple of minutes.
Like pulling us out of that little room.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave.
I'm Greg Milam, Sky's US correspondent here in Los Angeles. It is almost impossible to predict where these fires will go next. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. This gives you an idea of the strength of those winds, strong enough to bend and twist metal. You trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who've made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
I've seen the dark side of America. We are standing on the supply line right into the heart of America's opioid crisis. I've seen heartbreaking human stories.
There was a river of blood coming out of the mosque. That's a scene that you don't forget.
Christchurch has been changed forever by what happened here.
Boris Johnson has insisted he's done nothing wrong by offering to help relax rules to secure as many ventilators as possible at the height of the pandemic. Private texts show the Prime Minister told Sir James Dyson he would fix a restriction so the businessman could help make ventilators for the NHS. But it's raised questions over the ease of government access for big business. Well, the Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, defended the Prime Minister's actions, saying this was the sort of thing that happened all the time.
In reality, People are contacting ministers, contacting MPs all the time. Business people are contacting MPs all the time. Constituents also contact me on my phone. And I think that in a modern democracy, it's very good that people actually can have direct access to ministers and people who are taking responsibility. In this particular instance, I don't think they're separated. I think it's very important to realise that we were acting in unprecedented circumstances. The Prime Minister had to make decisions at very high speed, and there was a crisis. People were dying.
Well, we also spoke about today's major climate summit between world leaders, including some of the presidents and prime ministers of the planet's worst polluters. China has said it won't reach net zero until 2060, a decade after most other nations across the world. Well, let's talk to our Asia correspondent who's in Beijing for us this morning. I mean, they have at least agreed, a net zero target, but it's still a long way off.
It is a long way off, and right now China is the world's biggest polluter in terms of total volume of emissions. The US is the world's biggest polluter per capita. So the news that President Xi Jinping will be attending President Biden's virtual summit should be welcome. If there's going to be any action on climate change, it is going to require China and the US making these sorts of commitments, this sort of cooperation. And we did see John Kerry, the US Special Envoy for Climate, arrive in China for talks with his counterpart, so that does seem promising. But I think rather than cooperation, really, what we're going to see is competition between China and the US. At that summit, Xi Jinping didn't meet John Kerry himself. Instead, he met virtually again with the leaders of France and Germany, announced some new goals, showing that this is very much their agenda. They don't want to be bossed around by the US. And that's something that Xi Jinping also tried to do after President Donald Trump pulled the US out of the Paris Climate Accords. Xi Jinping took that mantle and said, we're going to lead the way on climate change. And it liked the adulation, the acclaim it got for that. Whether that has translated into emissions is another thing. So I think we will see this rivalry. The US and China are competing on so many fronts, economically, diplomatically, militarily. And climate might be added to that. Unlike those other sectors, though, this could be really good news for the environment. If these two superpowers really are trying to outdo each other on climate, that can only be good news for the planet.
OK, Tom, thank you. Well, just a reminder about the Daily Climate Show, which you can see later on today. A special half-hour edition can be seen tonight at 6:30 and 9:30, and you can catch up on the go with our Climate Cast. Now, the conviction of Derek Chauvin could be a landmark moment in America, but the question will now turn to whether the verdict could trigger change in the country. President Biden said it was a start. Clearly, more needs to be done. Well, let's talk to former law enforcement executive Michael Horace. He joined the police after himself suffering an attack by an officer. It's good to see you this morning. Look, can I ask first and foremost about your own experience? Because to be attacked by a police officer in your youth, to then move into the police force, even today would be a bit surprising.
Well, good morning and thanks for having me. While it may be surprising, I've always felt that it was my obligation and duty to become a part of the solution and not be a part of the problem. So I had the really honor and privilege to serve for 27 years and serve my community in a very substantial way.
Look, what do you think the fallout may be? Because we've seen obviously a lot of killing of black youths in particular over the last few years, which have caused outrage, but none more so than George Floyd. And with this pretty historic verdict on Tuesday, do you think this could be a catalyst for change?
Well, we're very hopeful that it'll do several things. Number one, it'll cause that critical change to policing culture in the United States. As you know, many times, culture eats strategy for lunch, and even the greatest leaders have not been able to promulgate change in these police departments. Number two, it'll send a clear and visible message to law enforcement officers that these egregious acts are unacceptable and will not be tolerated under the arm of the law. And number three, hopefully, it'll start to erode that lack of confidence that the public has gotten in law enforcement and restore trust and accountability to communities, particularly communities of color.
Can I ask if you thought Mr. Shauvin was going to get convicted of this? Because a lot of the initial reaction we've got was this huge sense of relief and people thinking, look, perhaps yet again this wouldn't happen.
Right. Well, I thought that he should have been convicted, but my learned and earned life experience has taught me that should and would and could are three different things. And repeatedly, we've seen similar cases result in a different outcome.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people referring back to Trayvon Martin.
Well, it's Trayvon Martin, there was Rodney King, and a whole slew of others. So this, although we hoped and anticipated and prayed, there was still some reticence to say that the system, yet again, would not work in the favor of the citizens.
How much distrust is there at the moment between particularly the black community and the police force? As you're a prime example of, there are plenty of African Americans in the police force. So, at what level does that trust start to build up?
Well, we're hoping that this might be a step in the right direction, but the mistrust and lack of trust is very substantial. What you saw yesterday was a sigh of relief from millions of people that have been beat down and beat up by a system that says that your lives don't matter. Now people have been asserted that, at least in this case, not only George Floyd's life, but other lives matter as well.
What about the reaction then from President Biden? I mean, the fact he has been, so outspoken of this, the fact this is being led from the very top, from the White House, is that going to make a difference?
Well, we'd like to think that leadership matters and leadership should matter. So we're hopefully that, if nothing else, he can start those critical conversations and get that government intact to the point where we can now act and move protest to policy.
It's a difficult situation, isn't it, for police forces who, understandably are going to feel a bit under fire, but potentially from some of this now. There's clearly going to be some anger towards the police, and that's absolutely understandable. How does the separate police forces actually get to start working within the community again in a more effective manner? Show your human side a bit more.
Well, I think you hit it you've nailed it. We have to get back to community policing. We have to start to erode that chip of trust that's been eroded, and we have to get back to being guardians and not warriors. There are those situations where we need that warrior mindset, ensure that we go home at night. But the day-to-day duties and responsibilities of police officers are to interact with the community, to make people feel safe and show them that they're there in their best interest. That has been eroded, and just like any other relationship in our lives, we're going to have to work really hard to get that back. And I think that now's the time to do it, if at all, if ever.
I mean, I guess one of the keys to this is going to be having a police force which properly represents the community it's serving.
Well, recruitment and hiring are two critical elements of community policing. We need to hire people that look like the communities and represent the communities that they serve. We need to ensure that we vet people properly so we don't get people in the profession that don't deserve the honor of serving. And then when we identify people that shouldn't be there, we need to get them out of this profession as soon as possible.
Matthew, it's good to talk to you this morning. Thank you. Now, still to come on Breakfast this morning, planning for a world beyond the pandemic. Is hybrid working here to stay? We'll find out in a couple of minutes.
There are things we all take for granted. As the rivers and tides flow, the sun will rise, the wind will blow, and the earth will spin. But are we now spiralling into a climate crisis which cannot be avoided?
No one can predict the impact that it's going to have.
Close to the peak here.
This is really the moment of truth. Expected to be hit very hard indeed.
What can be done to reverse the spiral? The Daily Climate Show on Sky News will look for the answers.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. There are hundreds of these turbines. That's what's left of the North Tunnel. This is a show of strength. Shrapnel from that explosion. This is nearly a week after the attack. It's a complete scene of devastation. To the heart of the stories that shape our world. We're not sure about the road. We're going to try and find a way out of Wuhan. We help you understand the world with us. Tom Cheshire, Sky News, Beijing.
For the early risers.
As we examine the story beyond the headline.
For the knowledge seekers.
Welcome to Divided States.
For the straight talkers, the curious, and the ones who want to be entertained.
Backstage, Sky News' entertainment podcast.
For wherever you are.
Welcome to the Sophie Ridge on Sunday podcast.
For the ones who want to know more.
Welcome to the All Out Politics podcast.
For the listeners.
From Sky News Storycast.
Sky News Podcasts. Listen and subscribe for free.
Did you know that if we make small changes to our lives, we can reduce air pollution by loads? But how much? Exactly, loads.
High pressure dominates the weather over the next few days, so that's going to bring us fine days but also rather frosty nights. But the sunshine's picking up temperatures really quite well. We're looking widely at 14 to 16 degrees Celsius today, with potentially a 17 or 18 for parts of Ireland or western parts of Scotland. In terms of air pollution, generally levels are going to be low, but there is just a chance of seeing one or two pockets picking up to medium over the next few days.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
Now, the pandemic has forced many of us into new ways of working, but is it all here to stay? Well, a report commissioned by the House of Lords COVID-19 Committee, focusing on a new style of living after the pandemic, has published its first series of papers outlining some benefits, including working from home and a possible move towards what they call hybrid healthcare. Well, let's talk to the chair of the House of Lords COVID-19 Committee, Baroness Lane Fox. Good to see you this morning. It's trying to get a saying every cloud has a silver lining, I guess. Hybrid working, how is that going to be implementable for most people?
Well, I think most people have tried to live in a hybrid world over the last year already. You know, not all jobs clearly can be done from home, but many, many millions of people have been asked to work from home where possible. And what we're calling for is to make sure that if this is something that people want to do, and if this is something perhaps in the future we are called to do again, that it's fair and that people have access to the right equipment, that they have more rights perhaps than they've had in the last year, rights to have a break, rights to have more physical activity if they're sitting down all day, you know, different style of contract with their employer than perhaps we've had in the past because of the new way that we're going to be working. But we're also calling for the other side of this, you know, lots of people being asked to do their services only online. You might be a doctor and you've suddenly had to do doctor's appointments. Clearly, schools have had to do a huge amount. And so we want to make sure that the people who are providing the services as well have got high quality digital skills and are able to build the best possible services for the people that are using them.
I mean, I know a lot of companies are sort of seeing some benefits of hybrid working, but isn't there perhaps a concern that this may have an impact on what is going on in the high streets, in towns and city centres? You've got fewer people going in, it's going to affect supply chains and cafes and restaurants and all the rest of it.
Yes, you're absolutely right. But we would argue that this is happening. You know, what's happened in the last year is in some ways an acceleration of trends that were going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years anyway. And we've sort of leapfrogged forward into the future. But what we need to do is make sure that in this leapfrog, we haven't left too many people behind, that we've given people the necessary skills for the jobs of the future. The high street is going to look different over the next decade, and we want to make sure that it looks different to the benefit of the maximum number of people, with great green spaces for people to gather together, with amazing places for people to perhaps learn new skills, for people to use technology in different locations. So in a way, these things were beginning to happen already, and the last year has fast forwarded us through so many different trends. We want to make sure that they really are equitable and that give the opportunity to the maximum number of people.
Can I ask about the safeguarding of people, though? I mean, like a lot of people, I work from home. Last year, I did 6 months presenting the programme from home, and it started off being great. I could get up later. I could have the cat on my knee when I was interviewing people like you. It was very nice. By the end of it, I was fed up. And by the end of it, by the end of it, I just needed to get back to the office. So how do we safeguard people and their mental health, really?
It's a really important question. Our committee is tasked with looking at economic and social well-being, and a huge part of that clearly is mental health. And, it's easiest for all of us. I've got a nice office. I'm sitting here talking to you. But imagine if you've got children at home, you don't have the equipment for them to be able to homeschool. You've got a job where you need to be online for most of the day. You may not have a fast connection. These are very big stresses in people's lives. So, while it's easy to paint some positives out of all of this, the fundamentals of our report show the massive inequalities that people face and the enormous stresses, not just for the haves and the have-nots, but also for people that were juggling so many things. And we need to make sure that we're giving people flexibility, but we're also being very aware of their mental health and people's mental health coming out of all of this. So these are enormous questions, and it's very important that we don't paint a picture that this was all upside and this was all positive for people. It really wasn't. And the pandemic has shown the enormous inequalities in our country. And if you look at it through the lens of this rapid acceleration through digital, it's just even more pronounced.
What about the hybrid healthcare side that I know you've been looking at? Because, again, from my personal experience, my GP was doing so much online. It was, do you know what? It was really quick. It was really easy. Yes. It was really efficient. And since things have eased off, they've pulled all that back. They've pulled all that offline. And it's back to the old system where it's slow and stodgy, if you like. How do we encourage people to actually use these skills when it comes to healthcare that we've gained over the last year?
You kind of summed up the whole report for us kind of brilliantly. Some of the benefits are immense. Being able to see a doctor in more quick times, be able to do it more on your own flexible schedule, and for the doctor as well, to not have to bring people in necessarily to the surgery when perhaps they could just do a quick video consultation. But, there hasn't been a strategy at the heart of government or within the healthcare system for this new blended approach. And as you say, much of this is good, much of this has been beneficial to patients, but much is unclear as well, and much also very difficult for people who don't have the same access to technology. So what we're calling for is for the very heart of government, led by the Prime Minister, to think about what this new world, what this hybrid world, where some things will be done better online, but some will absolutely not, and people will need that face-to-face support and connection offline, what it means and how it filters through the whole of the government system. This is a big change, and we're saying it's super urgent because, as you quite rightly say, some of these challenges that we faced, we overcame, and actually there were some benefits to them. But for other people, that was not the case at all, and we need to have some much clearer joined-up thinking at the heart of government, led by the Prime Minister, to make sure that we take the best of what's happened over the last year, but don't leave people behind, and certainly don't create terrible services for people going forward.
Great to talk to you this morning. Thank you.
Thanks.
OK, let's get a quick check on the weather with Jo.